Hi everyone, I'm Miss Newport. I'm a visual merchandising teacher at the High School of Fashion Industries, and today we are here with leading industry professional Erin Sciandra. Hi Erin, how are you doing today?
Hi, Laurel. I'm great.
Good, thank you so much for doing this for us. We're very excited.
My pleasure. Let's
Okay.
do it.
So I guess first question, just how long have you been in the visual merchandising industry?
Um, I started in 2000 when I graduated from college, so I've been doing this for 20 years now.
Okay, and where did you go to college?
I studied fine art sculpture at Pratt Institute.
Okay. Did you feel like when you were at Pratt, did you feel like that was going to lead you into visual merchandising, or how did you kind of end up in that industry?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I always was interested in a lot of different areas of visual arts, and I definitely my goal originally was to be a fine artist. But I chose the major of sculpture when I was in college because it afforded me the most opportunity to do different things. Whereas, like, I was interested in fashion, I was interested in printmaking, I was interested in all sorts of stuff, but those majors tended to be more rigid as far as what you were able to do. In sculpture, you could kind of do a little bit of anything, which was always how I chose to work. And then right out of college, I was looking for work as like an artist assistant, and I decided to put up flyers on Bedford Avenue. And this woman started following me, and at a certain point, she stopped me and she said, "You know, you should get a job where I just got a job. It's a company called Space Design, and they make all these big animated window displays for Christmas for like Saks and Lord and Taylor." And this woman was a complete stranger to me, but she was like, they only ever hire people if they have a reference. Like they don't even look at resumes without a reference. So you can tell them that I referred you. It was like, oh, okay, great. So then I started working for Space, and I started out first in their mold making department, making the molds for all the cast figures. And that was kind of my first foray into the display and visual merchandising world. And then from there, it took lots of twists and turns, but that's how I got into it initially.
Well, that is really incredible. That is a one of a kind story.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I know that there's probably lots of twists and turns even in just like a normal working day in this industry, but what, if you had to describe a typical work day, what does that look like for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, there isn't really any such thing as a really typical work day. I would say in general, I mean, that's also part of what I really like about my industry is that like it's sort of ever changing. But I mean, I would say one of the biggest components of any workday is planning and researching. In fact, I would say I probably spend more time planning and researching and ordering than I do actually fabricating. So it's maybe, I would say collectively, it's probably like 2/3 research and development, 1/3 fabrication.
That is really interesting. Just thinking about my students, I feel like I often have the hardest time getting them to sit in the planning phase. They want to jump ahead to the fabrication. Um,
Yeah.
so it's a challenge to kind of impart the importance of that part of the process. Do you, I mean, just kind of, I know this is like an offhand question, but can you speak a little bit more to why that part is so important?
You know, I'm thankful because some of my background is also in administration. Like I've worked some office jobs at different points. And that I feel like has actually really helped me in this field because it leads me, it's gotten me to be very, very organized and, you know, and to be very thorough because you sort of, when you're in an administrative position, you have, like, that's what you do, you have to.
Sure.
And so I think that sometimes creatives run into issues because they're so focused on the creativity and so focused on the hands-on part of it that all the other elements kind of fall to the wayside. However, it's like so often these jobs because the jobs that I do, like, you know, there's never enough time, there's never enough money, nobody wants to make decisions. It's always like you know, it's never an ideal situation. Like there's always some or many hitches. And
Yes.
so the one way that I find easiest to surmount that is to be really organized, to be really on top of things, and to have a real plan, and you know, to figure out my time, to figure out my money, to figure out my my resources, if I need help, if I need to job out things to other vendors, which other vendors, like it's there's just so many components to it that like it ends up being, once you get everything really squared away, then you get to like do the fun makey crafty part, and that it will, you know, it behooves you in every way shape and form to be really really on top of the organization.
I love hearing you say that it's never an ideal situation, because certainly also doing window displays in a public high school setting is also never quite an ideal situation with time or budget or materials at hand. So I think it's kind of nice for our students to understand that that's just also reality beyond beyond the school setting. So I think that's great. Um,
Well, and I would, if I may say one more thing, I
yeah.
mean, I think that uh, that was some of the notes that I made on a later question, is that I think that it's so important to be open to less than ideal situations, because those are going to be ones that might end up being like a great portfolio piece, or they might end up leading you to meet somebody else who then hires you for something else. So a couple of years ago, I had this one project come up. It was from an acquaintance of mine who's also in the field, and he was putting together a party for the company Woolrich for Fashion Week.
Mhm.
And he was like, I need to make this giant stuffed bunny. It has to be like 12 feet tall, and you know, it has to be made out of this Woolrich fabric, and I'm getting approvals on Thursday, and it has to be done on Monday. And I'm just like, oh my god. You know, it was just this crazy and I had no idea. I'd never done anything quite like that before, and so I didn't really know exactly how I was going to do it. There was no time. The money wasn't exactly what I would have liked it to have been, but I just figured it out, and it was just the greatest, most fun portfolio piece. Like it was such a great portfolio builder. It was a really stressful few days, but then I was just so happy that I had done it. So, I mean, I think that's a good example of one where it would have been perfectly reasonable to say, oh no, I can't do that, but I'm so glad I didn't.
Well, I think that kind of leads into, you know, we know a little bit now about your kind of educational background, but in general, you know, for students that are interested in pursuing visual merchandising, is there, you know, education, training, work experience that you feel like is necessary going into this?
Um, yeah, I mean, a little bit of like what I talked about before. I think that the organizational skills are really important. I think that also being very, very professional is really important. I would say, because in this line of work, like no matter how good you are, like there are other people that are as good as you. There are other people that are better than you, and really you come on, you show up on time. You're really pleasant to work with. Sorry, it's telling me my internet connection is unstable. Are we okay?
It's a little choppy, but that's okay. I'm with you. Well,
Professional. If you're pleasant to work with, you know, you're dependable and you do a good job, like you're the one that's going to get the call back, because you know, there's not, people don't want to take a risk on someone they don't know. Like if they know you and they know that you are professional and responsible and organized, they're going to want to give you a call back. I mean, other than that, I think in my particular career, I've always tried to diversify my skills as much as possible, because I kind of, where I've fallen in this world is that I try to sort of be available to make essentially just about anything. So having lots of different skills, even if I'm not a complete master of any of them, has benefited me a lot. I mean, there are plenty of people that say that's a terrible idea and that you should just like be laser focused on one thing, and they're not wrong, but that's very antithetical to how I've always worked.
Mhm. Well, So that kind of leads me down the list a little bit, but one of the questions I was planning to ask was, what industries or positions within this industry do you feel like this kind of skill set opens you up to? And because yours is so particularly diversified, I mean, um, you could speak to maybe all of the different things within this industry you've been able to do, or what you could do beyond this industry with this kind of skill set.
Um, well, yeah, I mean, my place in the industry has kind of always been making things and kind of transforming nothing into something, kind of making things, taking things that aren't so interesting and making them interesting and beautiful. I kind of like my role has always been sort of a handmade touch, and my industry is getting increasingly technological, and there's lots of like 3D printing, and there's lots of CNC cutting, and so and as the industry shifts more and more towards that, I think that people that do what I do are becoming less and less, and people are focusing a lot more on learning technological trades, which is probably a really super good lucrative idea. but my place has become and I've sort of further established myself as being the one who does, people call, like Barneys, especially in the later years, they just, everything was completely technological, how they made things. And then if they ever wanted something that had a little bit more of a handmade touch, then they like freak out because nobody knew how to do it. And so then they would call me and they would say, oh, we need this Burberry quilt that's like, the quilting is the logo, and then there's this embroidery and that and whatever. And then I would make them this quilt, So that's kind of how I've navigated through this industry. And as far as applicable skills, I mean, I think that if I were to switch industries, I think that I would end up going into something like project management, just harkening back to the organization and the time management and materials and budget management and everything. It's like I've had to do so much of that in my career, and those sort of base skills are kind of applicable almost across the board, because virtually all aspects of most industries like require some element of that. So that's, if I were to switch industries, that's probably what I would go into.
Okay, great. So then kind of in addition to time management, administration skills, hand making skills, what other kind of interests or skills or abilities do you think would help someone be successful in this industry?
Well, I mean, I think it varies from all the different areas. Like if you're interested in doing like window display, well, actually, I guess in all areas of this industry, like some knowledge of fashion is really good. Like some kind of keeping on top. Well, if you're working with fashion, I guess.
Sure.
If you're working with different sort of retail, it would be different. But I mean, I think just knowing the retail world that you're in is important. If you are in like fashion retail, like having a handle on, what's beautiful, how things are worn, stuff like that. I think that's very important. If you're in other sorts of retail, I mean, just having a sense of how things have been done, how things have been done by others, how things have been done in the past. But you should know what you're drawing from. You should know if you're doing something that has or hasn't been done before. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What do you like the most and what do you like the least about your job, and why?
Well, I can tell you straight away, the one thing that I like the very, very least about my job is hunting down money. That can be a very stressful, disheartening process. So that's the worst part for sure. There are so many things that I love about my job. I love that I'm always doing something different. I love that I'm always learning new things. I love that, you know, when I work with people, I love that I'm not working with the same people all the time. I'm working with different people. In recent years, I've done most of my work out of my home, but I do work in shops at times, and I work on site at times. And most of all, I mean, I love that I don't sit behind a computer 40 hours a week, in an office. And I mean, most of all, like my true love is making things. So like the fact that I get to work with my hands on an ongoing basis is really the primary thing that I love so much.
Great. I know that, you kind of touched on how technology has changed our industry or continues to change our industry. And I guess, I'm also curious how this time in general has changed your experience, or how has it affected, like with our social distancing and our quarantining? Are you finding that you are still making things with your hands, or what's your experience like right now?
Well, I am. Well, I mean, right at this very moment, I had 8 months of projects lined up with a shopping center in downtown Brooklyn, all of which have been suspended indefinitely. So, I do. I mean, I am still making things. I work on things for malls and for events and for big gatherings, and so it's kind of sort of non-existent at the moment, but hopefully we'll be up and running soon.
Yes, hopefully. What do you see as kind of the opportunities for advancement um, in the visual merchandising field?
Um, well, in a certain way, I feel like they're all endless, because no matter who you're working for, or what you're doing, there's always something bigger and better and interesting that you can go to. And I think, I don't know, I feel like in my personal career, I haven't been great at like really pursuing opportunity, but I feel like I've been very good at seeing opportunity that's in front of me.
Yeah.
And I think that, for instance, a couple of years ago, I took a job with this big firm that, they do a lot of prestigious projects, and I had been aware of them for a long time. I'd never worked with them. And I'd been sort of knocking on their door for a while. And then they called me for this project that was very, very interesting. And to be honest, I felt like the pay was like really not great, and even the work was like sort of a little, not quite where I'm typically working usually. But I really wanted to work with them. I really wanted to have a hand in this particular project, and so I took a gamble. And it didn't pay well. It was grueling, but in the end, I ended up getting connected with some other people who now I've done all this great work for. I've been working for these couple of hotels, which I never ever would have expected I'd be working for hotels, but like now I am, and I'm doing all these really fun projects, like turning the pool bar at the TWA Hotel into like a Swiss chalet for the winter, or I'm working on another project that I can't talk about because it hasn't opened yet, but with a Highline Hotel. And so it ended up being, I think that there are opportunities for advancement all around you. You have to learn to try to spot them, because they aren't always readily apparent.
I think that makes perfect sense. I think like with many industries, probably there's like a more corporate, I guess, linear approach. And I love that, you're a beautiful example of a more, as you said, like a twist and turn approach. That's kind of one that led me to teaching as well. So I like that for our kids to know that, it doesn't have to be so linear, like this step, this step, this step. It's just, wherever you are, look around you. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't have to be a corporate ladder that's rung by rung by rung by rung. It's like, it's twisty and.
Yeah. Well, kind of outside of that, is there any other advice that you would give a student interested in this career?
just to reiterate, be organized, be professional, be good. I mean, I would say, actually, one thing that I think, especially because you're all young students. I mean, I think I would say don't shut yourself off to learning, because one kind of obstacle that I've noticed with a lot of my younger colleagues is that they're so full of skill and confidence that sometimes they don't think they have anything to learn. And I think that that's it really, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because nobody knows everything. Almost everybody has something you can learn from them. And I think that I think it's of the utmost importance to be open to that, because you'll miss out on a lot if you aren't.
I agree. I think that's perfect advice. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for taking this time to talk with us and share all your insights
Yeah.
in general.